We're going to sort of transition into our next section, but I hope that everybody enjoyed the first half of the day, got to attend some really interesting talks, and I'm sure that you feel the same as me, which is that I want to be in each of the rooms, but I can't. So we are going to do a little bit of a share back later in the afternoon. So moving into the next session, we are very excited to actually announce that we have Liz with us today, but also keeping in mind for this afternoon, we're going to have the breakouts, and then we're also going to have Linda Henry coming in, and then also the celebration at the end of the day. So it is my great honor to introduce our lunchtime keynote speaker, Elizabeth Altman, LGO 92, SM 92. As mentioned earlier, Liz is able to join us here on short notice, but is really going to dive into topics that are timely and relevant. So we're going to talk about AI and how it's impacting the way that we live and work. She is an MIT alumna, course 2 and course 15, very impressive, and an associate professor of management at the University of Massachusetts Lowell's Manning School. She's also a digital fellow at MIT's Initiative on the Digital Economy. By the way, they are putting out some incredible research right now. And she is a non-resident fellow in the Economic Studies program at the Brookings Institute. And she's held visiting positions at HBS and the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Very impressive, Liz. Liz's work focuses on strategy, innovation, platforms, ecosystems, AI, and the future of work. She's also the lead author on the book Workforce Ecosystems, Reaching Strategic Goals with People, Partners, and Technologies. And she's also published in the HBS Review and the MIT Sloan Management Review. Before academia, she spent nearly 2 decades in industry, including 9 years as VP at Motorola. And in today's keynote, Liz is actually going to explore more into the evolving role of AI, workforce ecosystems, how AI is actually examining and shaping talent strategies and org structures. And drawing from her research, she's going to help us understand how AI's impact on workforce dynamics and leading breakout discussions where we can actually hear from her, share insights, questions, and actually jump into a discussion. So Liz, thank you so much for being with us today. Please come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Altman. It is an honor and pleasure to be here. Let me just set the stage. It's 10 o'clock Tuesday night. Walk into the house with my husband. We had been we volunteered at a food bank. We had just packed 340 meals. I see this email, beautifully written, of course, by Whitney, that invites me to come here. I look at it. It's like, I read it again. I was like, wait, this Friday? And then I think, I can't actually say I have a conflict. They know I'm going to be there. So I'm already registered. So I send off a quick, and I co-chair, quick shout out to the UMass Lowell Women's Leadership Conference, June 12th, if anyone's interested. And we're in the process of locking down our keynotes. So I've spent a lot of time looking for keynotes, and I know this problem, and I think I can't really say no. So I send off a quick note, sure, let's discuss it tomorrow. So Wednesday morning, I wake up, and I'm like, wait, this is not, let me just read this again. This is not any audience. This is 300 MIT alums, all women. It's not like they haven't heard of AI. Like, okay, so here is the plan. This is, you can see the slide. This is work I've done with a group of collaborators. I wouldn't be here without them. What I would like to do is start with something I know more about, which is workforce ecosystems, talk about the future of work, and then dive into some newer work that we're working on, which is AI and workforce ecosystems. And you'll see the slides are going to go from nicely polished to done last night and this morning. So a little grace, please, on those. But you will get, really, this is a book chapter draft that is under review right now. If all goes well, will be published sometime this year. And what I'd then like to do, and I'm going to try hard to leave enough time, we'll do some discussion groups amongst the tables to have you guys discuss this. And from here on for the rest of the day, I would love to hear your feedback because, again, given the room, you know many of you know a lot about these topics, whether it's future of work or AI, and AI in these contexts, and it would be fun to talk to you about it. So I'm also going to go super fast because I'm a professor and I had 48 hours, and so now I have too many slides. So the questions that we talk about are, how are organizations approaching workforces? How will they be in the future? And how are they using AI to orchestrate workforces? And if you don't want to stay for the rest of the talk, you can go to this QR code and see some of our publications of the last few years. The site is available. This was a 3-year project. I can tell kind of the funny story. In the first week of March in 2020, I received a note from David Kieran at Sloan Management Review saying, would you like to be guest editor of Future of the Workforce? He started with actually, and if some of you are on the SMR email list, you may have even gotten an email from him yesterday, because when they do surveys, often they come from David. So the first line of his email is, this is not spam. I know who you are, and I know your advisor, Mike Tushman. So it's like, again, kind of like, okay. So we have this phone call the first week of March, 2020. Just think about that for a second. And he says, I think we should talk about the future of the workforce. So at that point, I've now read, because I got the email, I've read their research that they've done for about a year, because this project is going on. Again, by the way, sponsored by Deloitte. I know we have at least one person from Deloitte here who generously sponsored the work. And I say to David, and this is important for as we talk about the research, I say, you know, I really appreciate this, I'm honored, but I've read most of your work, and it's kind of about HR and what happens inside the firm. And though HR is fine, it's just not what I do. I really am much more interested in platforms, ecosystems, complex relationships between organizations, interdependencies, networks, connections, and so it really probably doesn't make sense for me to be involved with your research much as I'd like to work with you. And he said, no, again, we know exactly who you are, and I think very insightfully said, we believe the future of the workforce is about connections, platforms, ecosystems, and we think it'd be very interesting to get your perspective and work with us on this. And that resulted in this 3-year project. We produced about 8 publications over the course of the years, including very short articles, some infographics, and much longer white papers. If you're interested, they're all available online. And then in 2023, we published this book that I think MIT Press has outside, if you're interested in this topic. And it's been great, and it's been fun to pull it all together. And so let me tell you a little about what's in it. So when we started, again, we're talking, future of the workforce. And we'd have these brainstorming conversations. And one day I said, okay, when we say workforce, what do we really mean? And it became clear that even amongst our research team, we had different views on this. And incredibly, we started talking to people, some very senior people, like the head of HR at Walmart and the CEO of Amazon's consumer business and others. And when we said, and the first time I said it cautiously because I really didn't want to sound ridiculous, I sometimes do. I said, so before I start, can you tell me how you define workforce? And to a person, they said, that is a great question. Nice, right? Like, we may have a research project. And they said, it's changing. And they said, we were having a meeting about it this morning, and I can tell you story upon story about Nike realizing in the first week of the pandemic that they couldn't figure out how many people were in their buildings because they knew the number of employees, but they had no way to aggregate the number of contractors and others. So what do we mean by this? We mean that we have employees, we have contractors, freelancers, and gig workers, subcontractors, and those first groups are often considered part of a workforce and a contingent workforce. But then we took it another step further and said complementers. If you have a smartphone, you use apps on it, the phone doesn't give you value unless you're using apps. Those apps were not created by employees of the companies that made your smartphone or even the operating system, right? So then why aren't the complementers considered part of the workforce? And of course, Gen AI now and other types of AI, robots, other technologies, sensors and all, in many ways not only affect the workforce, but can participate in the workforce now. And so we'll get to that in a moment. So we defined this concept of a workforce ecosystem that includes the first two, again, are more traditional, employees and long-term contractors, first three, freelancers and gig workers, but also service providers, complementers, and technologies. This is a quick snapshot of the research. We surveyed about 10,000 people, maybe some of you, over the number of years we were involved in this. I did over 100 executive interviews with various colleagues, and that included C-suite executives, academic leaders, thought leaders, spanned 138 countries, so this is not a US-centric phenomenon. 28% of the respondents from the United States, more than 2/3 of the respondents from outside the United States, 29 plus industries, and about 26% of the respondents came from companies with revenue above $1 billion, which is interesting to me because it means, yes, we caught big companies, but we also caught a lot of small companies. And we've seen this phenomenon play out in different ways, whether the companies are big or small. We've uncovered and unpacked various drivers of workforce change. Just to give you an example of 4, the nature of work is changing. This was happening before the COVID pandemic. It's happening, and the same thing with workers' preferences are shifting. If you look at both of those together, they were happening before the pandemic, they changed during the pandemic, they're continuing to change now, and we think that will continue. Technology is transforming how we engage and manage the workforce, and many workers, even if they are loyal employees, even if they've been there for many years, consider themselves much more free agents than they ever did before. 93% of managers view some external workers of some sort as part of their organization's workforce. 74% agree that effective management is critical. A much smaller percentage, in the 20s, say that yes, they're preparing and they understand what this means and what the implications are when you have a workforce ecosystem. One of the key points is you move from managing to orchestrating a workforce. So you coordinate groups of both internal and external contributors, trying to create an aligned effort. And a very important part of this is that often always your contributors have their own goals, their own needs. We, in this book chapter that we wrote, used writing the book chapter as an example. We're from multiple universities, we have editors, we have others, we have different pay, compensation systems. We all have our own reasons for contributing to these projects, yet together we pull together and produce this research, right? And so that has implications, again, I'll talk a little more about, but for leadership and for measurement and for other pieces of this puzzle. So we put together this framework, and again, I'm kind of fast forwarding through a number of years of research. We have this handy-dandy hexagon. I'll tell you that the designers didn't like it standing up. They kept turning it. I kept getting proofs, and it was sideways. I was like, no, it has to go this way. Why? Because we put senior leaders and business unit leaders on the center axis, because the whole thing revolves around leaders. Each hexagon represents a theme, a topic In the book, each one becomes a chapter. Just going through them quickly, management practices, for example, you can imagine how one hires, how one does performance management, how one compensates, all has to change when you have a workforce ecosystem. Technology enablers, again, I'll get to that in a moment with AI and others. Integration architectures means how tightly or loosely you manage the ecosystem. So Google Play Store, for example, is much looser with how they deal with developers and apps than Apple is with their certifications. So neither is right or wrong. They're just different, and they're different approaches and different strategies. And one needs to understand those integration architectures to understand how these workforce ecosystems work. Leadership approaches, if you're managing a group of people who don't work for you, you end up with managing very differently than in a traditional command and control type of an organization. And on the outside, we have the groups that are most affected. Human resources, of course, normally deals with employees. In the US, those are W-2 type employees. Procurement often deals with not only procuring pencils and other important equipment, but it sometimes usually deals with procuring contractors as well. And that's you get into a very interesting jurisdiction question. IT has implications, finance, legal. If I were to do this again, I would figure out some way to incorporate marketing, because I've gotten in a lot of trouble that marketing is not there. It's not that marketing isn't important, it's just it didn't rise to the level of implications as these others. On IT, I'll tell you one very quick story. Early in the research, I was talking with a very senior person at NASA, and he said, you know, he was kind of thinking about the concepts we were discussing. We were in an interview, and he said, you know, we give our bots employee ID numbers. And I said, wait, what? And he said, no, we do. We don't give them badges, of course. I was like, oh, good, great, that's good. But what do you mean? And he said, they need to access data from our systems that you can only access if you have an employee ID number. Now, you could say, look, this is semantics. They can change that. That's a legacy system. But it was, in my mind, indicative of where things were going, where clearly they were having bots do something that they had never envisioned a technology doing for them before. And so they had to have this workaround kind of in the transition period. But it just shows how technologies were, even a few years ago, playing this role of worker, and that you can start to imagine the implications of that. So again, in the longer version of this discussion, each hexagon has its own little discussion. In this case, 83% of our respondents said they have data and technology systems to support their workforce, but only 35% say their organization has data and systems to support managing both employees and also all these external contributors. So technology, we realized as we were having these interviews that people talked very broadly about technology, and it was just too big a word, and it wasn't clear what people meant. And that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone here. So we broke it into these 5 roles that technology play: work tech, workforce tech, workplace tech, credentialization and verification, and technology as a participant. And so the bottom 2 are most interesting, and really the last one, I think, for today. The credentialization and verification, I can tell you, when you have these workforce ecosystems and you have many contingent workers, and by the way, I'll give you an example. Cisco, a couple of years ago, as we were starting this, had 83,000 employees and 50,000 contingent workers. There's another organization that had 100,000 employees and 50,000 workers. So a million years ago when I was at Motorola, we had contractors, but it was like 5%. Our research now shows that it's between 30 and 50% of a full organization. So that's why this is a relevant conversation, and very interesting to CEOs and CHROs. This is no longer fringe, right? This is fundamentally how organizations are operating, big and small. So number 5 there. Fortunately, since we wrote this before Gen AI really hit the scene, we had people on the team who knew enough about AI and we could see enough was going on that we created this category, technology as a participant in workforce ecosystems. And again, this is where technologies do the work within the workforce, like bots. So as soon as we finished the main research on this, we turned to this opportunity to do our initial article for Brookings. This is out, that's the QR code for the article. Because of my relationship with Brookings, I was talking with them and we said we should think about this. And so we put together this relatively short article. It's David Kieron, Christoph Riedel, who's fantastic, a partner, co-author of mine at Northeastern. And we did this article on, okay, we have workforce ecosystems, now we have AI, how do they go together? And what we started to think about is there's a common question of how will AI impact jobs? And that's what people, especially in the beginning of this whole discussion, were like, what's going to happen to jobs? And we said, okay, that's fine, but a better question, we think, is how will AI impact and be impacted by, because I think we can have both conversations, workforce ecosystems. And in answer to the question, and again, this is where I'm getting into kind of our newer work, we have broken it into 3 work categories. It's designing and conducting work, supplying workers, and measuring work and workers. It doesn't cover everything that workforces do, but we have found this to be a good way to separate them and a useful framework to talk about AI in workforces. There are 2 main roles, executor and collaborator. If you're familiar with this research, you've probably heard it in terms of automation and augmentation. You may also hear it about productivity assistant and thought partner. Lots of people are kind of trying to separate these roles. Again, I don't have time to go deep into this, but I think it's very important to understand different roles, particularly of Gen AI, but also other types of AI. So I'm going to fly through some examples for all 3 of these. And this is where we're starting to have these conversations and starting to go through this. So designing and conducting work, of course, AI supports decision making. By the way, if my students were presenting these slides, I'd give them a very hard time for them being too text heavy, not graphic, and not interesting enough. But that's what you're getting, sorry. Okay, don't tell them. All right, so when there are complex supply chains and coordination and collaboration is important, like food delivery platforms, like Grubhub or DoorDash, AI is having a huge impact. It has completely changed the way that industry works because you can do scheduling, matching, rating, routing, and when you think about it, that is designing work, conducting work, frankly, measuring work as well. Tom Malone, here at MIT, did some amazing work early on different roles that AI plays. And I find it super helpful to think about AI as an assistant, AI as a peer, AI as a manager. And when I first started looking at this, I thought, I don't really buy into this AI as a manager until I started thinking about as simple as Uber. And, you know, Uber, if you're an Uber driver, the algorithm tells you where to go, when to go there, how to go there, and evaluates how you do on it. So under many metrics, it is acting as a manager. AI acts also as a worker. An example is being able to screen large groups of resumes and then provide small lists back. We talk a lot about automating tasks versus jobs. And again, I think it's a very important point about how you start to disentangle tasks from jobs and where AI can help automating tasks versus full jobs. And this is the first time I'm truly mentioning risks, really. I will say, and I'm going to say it again, that I'm not talking enough about it in this talk, again, with kind of 30, 45 minutes. But for each of these topic areas, you can have whole long discussions of what the risks are. And then, of course, we can have bigger level ones as well. In this case, over-automation and loss of autonomy are clearly two risks that we see. In terms of supplying workers, AI is very involved now in hiring, screening, and matching through platforms. That's true when you're looking for an employee. It's even more true when you're looking for contingent workers, short-term contractors, via platforms and via relationships with contractors. It can help managers determine the skills to find, and it can write job descriptions, working with humans, et cetera. On the worker side, it helps create resumes and CVs. I'm sure you're all seeing this. It improves communication, coordination, and matching. One of my favorites is the second bullet. As external workers, so contractors, are able to coordinate more easily and in more sophisticated ways with them amongst themselves, they also can do more complex tasks. As they can do more complex tasks, if you go back to the workforce ecosystem discussion, of course it means you can bring more outside and you can focus differently. It allows you to verify and validate skills, and it helps find opportunities for workers to gain new skills. If you're interested in this, although it's not so much on AI, I believe Thursday, a paper I just wrote on workforce development in the United States is coming out from Brookings. Risks, again, here are increase and perpetuating hiring biases. Finally, measuring work and workers. So we all know AI is dramatically reducing the cost of data collection. You're able to analyze unstructured data to assess performance. What's interesting is we've been able to do this for a long time with manual labor. We've not been able to do it as easily for knowledge work. With the sophistication of these systems now, we are much more able to do that, where we can find patterns and trends in very unconventional ways. IBM is able to predict whether people are going to resign or not, something like with 95% accuracy. It's a really interesting example. Tracking location, movement, biometrics, affect, performance, et cetera. The risks, of course, get around surveillance, invasive monitoring, dehumanizing workers, all of this. And there are substantial ethical and regulatory considerations, both in the US and abroad. So that was a quick run through. I'm happy to share any of that with people, but I'm hoping that will get you getting you to start thinking about how AI plays into these various elements of an organization and what managers need to do. So what we haven't discussed enough, and I just wanted to make sure I put it up here, again, ethics, moral dilemmas, algorithmic biases, data privacy, security, transparency, data itself, data ownership and collection, all of these topics overlay everything I just discussed. International AI regulations, compliance obligations, strategic and ethical leadership, and the responsibilities around that. Leadership I touched upon. I would love to do a whole other talk on leadership and write a whole other book about it, because I think the leadership implications of this whole conversation are enormous. And I touched briefly on this executor versus collaborator. Again, I'm a professor. I give out resources and references. Colleagues of mine, Elise Fari and Gabriele Rossani in Milan, have done great work on modes of Gen AI usage. They just helped me by zooming in with my undergraduates and talking to them about the difference between productivity assistants versus thought partners. In February, they issued an HBR paper, which I would point you to and highly recommend, and this is their book that just came out, and I'm happy to give it a plug. Okay, we have somewhere around 15 minutes left or less. I would suggest, if you're game, that we have discussion groups. I will leave this up. I know we don't have enough time to discuss all of these. I would say you can take 7 or 8 minutes. That sounds about right. And pick 1 or 2. Right? If you're most interested in the workforce discussions, workforce ecosystems, then focus at the top. How do you define a workforce in your own organization? Who and what is included? The second, what roles of AI and emerging technology are playing in the workforce? What differentiates orchestrating a workforce ecosystem versus managing? And then what are the biggest leadership challenges associated with AI and workforce ecosystems? So I've done breakout groups on all of these questions and versions of them. I'm sure, given the room again, we could talk for, I don't know, hours about most of these conversations. But I'm giving you 7 minutes. Go. So, and then we'll have a quick amount of readouts. Okay, I'm going to start to wrap it up because I want some time to do report outs. And I knew this would take a few minutes. Let's get everyone back. No, we're good. Just warming up to the idea that you might want to wrap up your conversations sometime in the next 30 seconds or so. Then I'll make a lot of noise. And you can help. What? Yeah, right. All right. That's it. Now you can make noise. Okay, so who has something that they'd like to say? We have 2 running mics. We have 7 minutes. So I'm going to ask you to be super concise, but I'd love to hear about some of the conversations. So why don't we start any of the tables right there, because this gentleman's holding a mic. Do I have to cold call? What do we think? Anyone over there? This side of the room, we're going to have to do a competition. This side of the room is about to lose. Okay, there we go, right here. Okay.
We got a little bit into, how you manage. We were doing number 3.
Great.
Orchestrating versus managing, and how do you think about developing people over time so that you can delegate to them? Are you also doing that for the bots that you're managing? Does it flatten the hierarchy? And it was an interesting discussion, but we have no results for you. Sorry.
Story of my life. Okay. Wait 1 second. You're going to get a mic in a second. And then we're going to go here next. So if you can find somebody.
We have someone here younger in their career at a consulting firm, major name, was talking about generative AI and does it help the leaders of the future, or is it making them obsolete in terms of can you do the spreadsheets, the PowerPoints, and all these things using generative AI? Does that make you better off at your job getting up to the leadership position, or does it make you obsolete later on?
And what was your
So the
take?
older generation at the table said, no, you definitely, it should help augment because you still need to be able to synthesize, analyze, review, and use it, and also check for biases, because earlier today we learned in the healthcare sector about how there are, in subgroups, you can have negation and biases and so forth in AI, and so you need to have the human side to oversee that.
Yeah, fantastic. So again, AI is a thought partner, a collaborator, some productivity, but kind of spanning both. Over here. Go ahead. It's on.
Okay, sorry. We talked about orchestrating versus managing as well, and we didn't actually talk that much about how AI works into that, but just thinking about the difference between having a group of folks who you're managing the details of versus finding the different strengths and the synergies and bringing that together, and how that depends a little bit on the culture and even the personality of the individual, whether they're a command and control kind of person or if they're more of a leader or an a conductor, if you will.
Great. Well, and I'll tell you 2 quick things on that. So the biggest shift we see is with this question about how much control you have and traditional control in the organization. And the answer usually is it's most successful when it's a highly mission-driven organization. So and even if it's not, if the CEO or the leader, whoever they are, can get everyone bought into the mission, then having people from different organizations working together becomes easier. Great. Right here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maria Kellis, MIT 98, 9902, and also I was course 2 and 15, so. And I'm excited to be in this room of amazing people, amazing. And one question that we brought up in the table is that AI is already here, it's happening, it's moving. And we are the last generation, probably, that can train AI. And is it 5 years, 10 years? We don't know. But very soon, it's going to stop learning from us. So what can we do? And I kind of want to give us the hope that our humanity, our goodness, it can lead AI. And I also wanted to ask you to kind of comment on that.
Sure. It's like the 10 o'clock email again. I think it's a really important and insightful observation, right? It's I think, I'm not sure who said it, but someone said, every day the AI you use is the worst AI you'll ever use, right? Because that's how fast it's changing. So I think with that, couple that notion, it's not as bad as today's the youngest you'll ever be, but it's the same idea. So this notion that today is the worst AI that you'll ever use, then coupled with, and we are the generation that is kind of having such an impact on its development, is a very interesting kind of connection to make. And I think we all need to think about what that means in terms of our participation in the whole game. Let's say one more. Thank you.
So our table, we discussed AI being used in law, biotech, and then the question, two of us work on climate, and so then the question was, what were the climate implications of that? So I work on national climate policy, and I was going to say how I was going to be using AI to do land use planning and some other things, but then the question is in terms of the energy emissions cost of AI, which are substantial. So different direction, but also I think really important as we think about how we're using it in the workplace.
Yeah, fantastic. We actually have time for one more. I think this person's hand has been up a number for a little while. I think a microphone's coming to you. We'll give you the last word on this, and then I'll say one or two things.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Sammy Tang from NBAT24, and I work in pharma industry. So I know tech industry using AI more advanced already, but for pharma, especially corporate level, there's a few things we discussed over here is, from leadership perspective, it is the investment and the return, especially for certain industry are not there yet. We look at the proposition of value and the complexity in each the process of the whole process of drug development. So people are gonna look at how much we invest a lot already, maybe we haven't seen the quick return yet. So that's one thing on the leadership level, what usually we talk about a lot. But then on the workforce perspective, when our team come to us, even I'm actually a digital background, they will even ask, what about us? Whether any job will be obsolete in the future. I told them, don't worry. Actually, it's about if you don't use AI assisting you, maybe your job will be replaced, but it's not you will be replaced. So I think the workforce, the mindset, and the training in the future with AI would be different. So those are two different perspectives from leadership and from workforce.
That's fantastic. And I think there are a lot of these conversations about what happens with jobs, what happens with tasks. So I think you can see though here, in this little microcosm, in that, whatever it was, 7 minutes, we went cross-industry, we went cross-function, we went cross-topic, and I would just encourage you to keep learning as much as you can about this. It's clearly going to is impacting all of our lives. So I think we're out of time. I really appreciate all your engagement, and it's been great to be here. And I'm happy to talk with people and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Liz. Hopefully, everyone is feeling inspired by that and not too scared. I think that we're going to be, of course, just involving and training and also getting ourselves more educated on these AI tools as we move forward. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully, all of us will be able to check out your latest book as well. So just going into the rest of the day, we've actually got the next session of breakouts starting at 2 o'clock. So it gives you a little bit of time to grab a coffee and then head on down. We're going to have 4 discussions this time. So the first one is going to be Igniting Change, the MIT alumni leading local climate action. So that's group number 1. Group number 2 is going to be Looking Forward by Looking Up, MIT Women in Space. And by the way, Janelle just came off a flight from Tokyo. So thank you for being here with 3 hours of sleep. We appreciate you. We're also going to have a session on pay equity. The conversation continues. And then the last session is Realize Your Superpowers. So we're going to do the sessions. We're going to have a break. Please take advantage of the headshots that we have, the postcards, take a chance to maybe do some networking. And then we're actually going to come back at 3:35 to hear from Linda Henry with the Boston Globe. All right. Thank you all.